Because A-listers are paid enough money to buy a couple of islands in the Caribbean when they sign up for a feature, they can't half-ass it. If Tom Cruise or Chris Hemsworth are being paid $20 million per film, they need to give it their all to prove they are worth every penny. But there are times where Hollywood stars redefine the phrase the bare minimum. In some films, actors were paid millions for a day's work to utter one line of dialogue or to do literally nothing. And so, with that in mind then, I'm Ellie with Whatculture here with 10 actors who got paid to do pretty much nothing. Number 10. Snoop Dogg in the Addams Family. 2019's Addams Family failed to bowl over viewers, but even the harshest critics praised the excellent cast. Oscar Isaac feels like he was born to portray Gomez. Charlize Theron nails Morticia. Finn Wolfhard performs the impossible by making Pugsley an interesting character for once. But the one casting choice that perplexed everyone was Calvin Cordoza Brodus Jr., aka Snoop Dogg. Yes, his real name is Calvin. The legendary rapper may not be the first person one would think of when casting for the Addams Family, but Snoop is so effortlessly charming he could play almost any role effortlessly. So who was he cast as? Cousin It, the bewhiskered Addams who speaks in high-pitched gibberish. This means a casting director hired a musician with one of the most recognizable voices on the planet and cast him in a role where his speech is indecipherable. Weirder still, his name was used to promote this pointless reboot despite the fact Snoop never says a line that's comprehensible to the human ear. Although it's not clear how much Snoop was paid for the role, any amount is too much considering how redundant his performance actually is. Number 9. Sean Penn in the Angry Birds movie. There are some actors you can't envision lending their voice to a children's cartoon. Can you picture Daniel Day-Lewis in Minions or Clint Eastwood in the Emoji Movie? Because performers like this are renowned for serious dramas, you can't imagine them appearing in a kiddie property. And because Sean Penn is a 2-time Academy Award winner, best known for his work in Dead Men Walking, Milk and Mystic River, no one could believe it when he was cast in the Angry Birds movie. Why him? Was his casting a joke? And the answer is kind of. The film's executive producer, David Mizell, has been friends with Penn for years and thought it would be funny to cast him in the role of the grumpy bird Terrence. But here's the problem. His character doesn't speak. Throughout the entire movie, Terrence communicates through grunting. Penn's casting is so nonsensical. He admitted he didn't understand why Mizell wanted him for the role, and it took a 30-minute pitch before he was on board. Number 8. Ving Rhames in Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. After climbing the Burj Khalifa, hanging on the side of a plane in mid-takeoff, and chasing a guy with a literal broken leg, it seems like the hero of Mission Impossible, Ethan Hunt, can accomplish anything. But it's easy to forget he gets a lot of help from colleagues, especially his intelligence operative Luther Stickle. In all of Hunt's missions, Luther has been there, hacking systems, building intel, or just giving his longtime friend some advice. But while watching Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, viewers noticed Luther was notably absent and so assumed he wasn't in the movie. Thankfully, he popped up in the final scene for a little cameo. His appearance was brief, but it was nice to see Luther chatting to Ethan like old times. Although he was paid $3 million for the previous entry, Rhames demanded far more for this entry, knowing Mission Impossible was a guaranteed moneymaker. Despite only appearing for 3 minutes, he earned a staggering $7.7 million. Number 7. Michael Biehn in Alien 3. Like the Terminator, Michael Biehn got to play the male lead in the sci-fi sequel Aliens. But unlike the Terminator, his character, Corporal Dwayne Hicks, lived, giving Biehn the impression he would get the chance to return for the follow-up. So when he discovered his character was killed off in Alien 3's prologue, he was ticked off. And when I say ticked off, I mean he used dozens and dozens of 4-letter expletives while talking to the director on the phone. But it gets worse. The studio needed Biehn's permission to use his likeness for the scene where Hicks's corpse is discovered. When Biehn flat out refused, the studio execs asked if they could use a photograph of him instead. Biehn reluctantly agreed. As compensation, Biehn was paid almost the same amount he earned while working on Aliens for 10 months. Number 6. Marlon Wayans in Batman Returns. Batman Returns went through so many revisions it bared little resemblance to the finished product. At one point, the story would have centered around the Penguin finding a treasure map under Bruce Wayne's house. In another script, the Penguin would have discovered Christopher Walken's character Max Schreck was his long-lost brother. And in the latest script, Batman would have teamed up with Robin, played by Marlon Wayans. However, this wasn't some idea that was thrown out early in the production. This was such a last-minute change. Robin's costume was completed, sets for his scenes had been constructed, and action figures for Batman's sidekick were ready to go. Ultimately, it was decided that Batman Returns was overstuffed with characters, resulting in Robin's appearance being delayed until Batman Forever, where Chris O'Donnell was recast in the role. But since Wayans had signed a contract for a 2-movie deal, he was still paid $100,000. Not only that, Wayans is still being paid now. For nearly 30 years, the scary movie star has received residual checks for both movies, even though he doesn't appear in either of them. Number 5. Sean Connery in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves concludes with Robin of Locksley defeating the wicked, Christmas-cancelling Sheriff of Nottingham and rescuing Lady Mariam. Just as Robin and Mariam are about to tie the knot, their ceremony is interrupted by the sudden return of King Richard the Lionheart, played by the late Sean Connery. The king thanks Robin for protecting his kingdom while he was away and shows his appreciation by giving the bride away. Even though Prince of Thieves was underwhelming overall, this climax is remembered fondly due to Connery's wonderful surprise cameo. Would you believe the studio initially wanted John Cleese? The Scottish performer is so effortlessly charismatic as the English king, most people don't realise he only has 4 lines. Not only that, Connery only worked on the film for 1 day. Just when you thought you heard it all, he got paid $250,000 for his teeny-weeny appearance. Number 4. John Wayne in The Greatest Story Ever Told. Like many biblical adaptations at the time, The Greatest Story Ever Told had an all-star cast, including Max von Sydow, Charlton Heston, Donald Pleasance, Telly Savalas, Martin Landau, Sidney Poitier, and Angela Lansbury. However, the one performer everyone was keen on seeing was John Wayne. Because of his star power, viewers were more excited to seeing the Duke than the actors playing Jesus or the Devil. Sadly, fans were disappointed to learn Wayne only played a centurion at the crucifixion and only delivers a single line. Despite only working on The Greatest Story Ever Told for 2 days, Wayne bagged $250,000. Now, getting paid a lot for little work isn't a big deal in Hollywood. In fact, Wayne got paid the same amount for 4 days' work on The Longest Day. But his appearance in The Greatest Story Ever Told is worth addressing for a couple of reasons. Firstly, he was the first person cast and was used as a selling point over 4 years before the movie came out, even though he only appears for 5 seconds. Number 3. Marlon Brando in Superman 2. It's well known among film fanatics that Marlon Brando was paid an unprecedented $7 million for his performance as Jor-El in Superman the Motion Picture, despite only appearing for 7 minutes. If you think that's impressive, the Godfather star made over double that amount for his work on Superman 2. At this point, you might ask, wait, did Jor-El appear in the sequel? No, he didn't. Brando shot a scene where a hologram of Jor-El speaks to Superman, but it was left on the cutting room floor. The scene was reshot where Superman speaks to a hologram of his mother, Lara. Even though it's always irritating when an actor scene is cut, this decision was massively problematic for the studio. You see, Brando was contracted to be paid 11.75% of Superman 2's earnings. But since he was no longer in the movie, this stipulation was revoked, making his fee significantly lower. Enraged by studios meddling, Brando took the producers to court and won. In the end, Brando was paid $15 million for a 3-minute scene that nobody saw until it was released in the director's cut 26 years later. Number 2. Mark Hamill in Star Wars Episode 7 – The Force Awakens. After officially joining the cast of Star Wars Episode 7 The Force Awakens, Mark Hamill was informed by the director J.J. Abrams that his character, Luke Skywalker, wouldn't have a prominent appearance, since the story would focus on a new generation of heroes. Despite receiving this warning, Hamill still assumed he would have a reasonable amount to do. Sadly, Hamill and the entire Star Wars community was disappointed to see the iconic Jedi only show up in one dialogue-free scene. Because Luke is regarded as the face of George Lucas's franchise, it was bizarre to see the Force-wielding hero have such a minimal role in this sequel. But what's more bizarre is how much he got paid. Despite the fact he didn't do anything except turn around and remove his hood, Hamill was paid $1 million. By comparison, his salary for the original Star Wars was $650,000. Stranger still, Daisy Ridley and John Boyega received an insultingly low fee of $300,000 for The Force Awakens. Number 1. Bob Hoskins in The Untouchables. Bob Hoskins has such an uncanny resemblance to Alphonse Scarface Capone, it's criminal he never got the chance to play the infamous gangster in a film adaptation. However, Hoskins was supposed to play Capone in Brian De Palma's The Untouchables. When the director met Hoskins to discuss the movie, he admitted that Robert De Niro was his first choice to play Capone. Because De Niro had yet to agree to work on the film, De Palma told Hoskins the role was his if he wanted it, which the Cockney actor agreed to. So when Hoskins discovered De Niro had accepted the part shortly after, Hoskins assumed he no longer had ties with the project. But one day he received a check worth $200,000 from De Palma and a letter reading, "Thank you, Bob, for being my standby. Love, Brian." Hoskins was bewildered since he hadn't the slightest clue he would be paid for his time with the renowned filmmaker. Immediately after receiving the money, Hoskins rang up De Palma and said, "Brian, do you have any more films you don't want me to be in?